Okinawa 1945. Floodlights glare over a patch of muddy field. The war is practically over, but no one here believes in peace yet. A line of captured Japanese nurses' uniforms soaked, faces blank, stand shivering in silence. Their hair clings to their cheeks, caked in dirt. An American soldier steps forward, rifle slung, voice echoing across the night. "Sit on my lap." For a heartbeat, no one moves. The women exchange terrified glances. They'd been told that capture meant shame, violation, or worse. Every breath feels like a countdown. The soldier doesn't shout again, he just waits. His expression unreadable under the harsh beam. If you were here, you wouldn't know whether to breathe or pray. By the way, what city are you watching this from, and what time is it right now? Drop it in the comments. Let's see how far this story travels. The nurses hesitate. Their commander, Corporal Hata, stands at the front. 24 years old, trained to die rather than surrender. The mud around her boots bubbles with rainwater. She whispers to the woman beside her, "We cannot." But the guard, Private Lasker, doesn't raise his weapon. Instead, he pulls a wooden crate, sits down and taps his knee. "It's okay," he says softly. The word "okay" sounds alien. Reports say nearly 4,000 Japanese women were captured across the Pacific during these closing months, many in the Okinawa sector, where desperation had erased all illusions of victory. They expected bullets. What they got was confusion. The silence stretches. Every drop of rain sounds like an accusation. The women's eyes dart from the soldier's hand to the horizon, glowing with distant artillery. Somewhere, another war is ending, but here, something different begins. When Corporal Hata finally steps forward, it isn't surrender. It's disbelief walking toward a mystery. She kneels instead of sitting. The soldier sighs but doesn't force her. His face softens as if remembering something from home. That's when the tension breaks, not with violence, but with something stranger, decency. And in that fragile pause, the old rules of war start to crumble. Because after this night, Hata's defiance and his patience will change everything that follows. Rain still falls in thin silver lines, cutting through the floodlight haze. Corporal Hata kneels in the mud, refusing the order. Around her, the other nurses stand frozen, breathing shallow, uniforms trembling against their skin. The guard, Private Lasker, lowers his hand slowly, confusion flickering behind his young eyes. This isn't what he expected either. For Hata, defiance is not bravery, it's survival. She remembers her training. Captured women were to die rather than surrender. The Imperial Code drilled it into every heartbeat: honor before life. Many female medics carried grenades sewn into their skirts. Reports later estimated nearly 80% were ordered to use them if capture became inevitable. Better to die than dishonor, their instructors whispered, but Hata has no grenade, only mud, rain, and a war that already feels lost. Private Lasker shifts uneasily, lowering his rifle to the ground. He mutters something she can't understand, English, soft and hesitant. The women behind her brace for violence, but none comes. Instead, the American simply crouches, his weapon untouched, hands open. His uniform is soaked, his face barely older than hers. For the first time, she sees not a conqueror, but another exhausted human. Across the camp, a jeep backfires, echoing through the wet darkness. A searchlight flickers out. The air smells like oil and fear. Hata's pulse drums louder than the rain. She glances up, eyes locking with the soldiers. There's no hatred there, only something she can't name yet. He doesn't repeat his command. He just says, slowly, "You're safe." The words land heavier than gunfire. Safe. She doesn't believe them, can't, yet something shifts. An unspoken truce between captor and captive. Around them, the other nurses lower their heads. watching this silent standoff between two strangers bound by a single, impossible order. The American rises, wiping rain from his sleeve, and gestures toward the tents. Food, he says, pointing. It isn't kindness she sees its structure, discipline, even decency maybe. Hada hesitates, then stands, eyes still fixed on his. She will not sit on his lap, but she will follow him. That small act, that refusal paired with reluctant trust, will ripple far beyond this night. Because the next morning, when the women enter the camp, they'll discover something they never expected care. The dawn creeps over the ridge like smoke, gray, tired, and full of ghosts. The night's tension still hangs heavy in the damp air. Corporal Hada stands by the camp gate, eyes red from sleeplessness, mud hardened on her knees. Around her, the other women huddle in silence, waiting for orders. They expect shouting, punishment, anything that fits the stories they were told back home. Instead, the American soldier from last night approaches quietly. Private Lasker, his helmet sits crooked, chin strap loose, fatigue jacket unbuttoned. He carries a tin mug steaming with coffee. When he stops in front of Hada, she stiffens. No translator, no commanding officer, just that same impossible calm. He extends the mug. Drink, he says. The steam curls between them like a truce. Hada doesn't move. The last time a man offered her anything, it was an order, sit on my lap. But now, his voice isn't a command, it's a bridge. Reports from the time mention New U.S. directives issued in late 1940, 4 explicit rules for humane POW handling. Any mistreatment, even minor, meant court-martial. Private Lasker knows this, but more than that, he looks like someone who's simply tired of cruelty. Hada's hands tremble as she accepts the mug. The heat shocks her palms. She expects a trick, a sneer, a smirk. None come. He just nods, then takes a slow sip from his own cup to show it's safe. It's the smallest gesture, but it detonates every certainty she's carried since capture. Her world was built on absolutes: enemy equals evil, surrender equals shame. Yet this man in mud, stained boots, treats her with a politeness her own officers rarely showed. A Red Cross report from the Pacific later noted that many Japanese prisoners were stunned by the Americans' adherence to rules in war. One POW wrote, "They obeyed even when no one was watching." Hada doesn't yet understand that discipline, but she feels it. Lasker smiles faintly, gestures toward the camp kitchen where tin plates clatter and steam rises from breakfast rations. "Come," he says. She hesitates, then follows, still cautious, still calculating. For the first time since surrender, hunger outweighs fear. And as they step into the camp's heart, Hada will see something even more bewildering than mercy comfort. The camp smells like coffee, wet canvas, and diesel smoke. It isn't the nightmare they imagined. It's stranger than that. Rows of tents flap in the coastal wind, each marked with stenciled white letters, POW Female Sector. Inside, cots line the floors, thin but clean, metal bowls stacked neatly, a bucket of soap. A guard walking past hums a song Hada doesn't recognize. For the captured Japanese nurses, it feels like stepping onto another planet. They were told that capture meant degradation, torture, starvation. Instead, a corporal in a U.S. uniform gestures toward trays of food, white bread, meat stew, and something called coffee substitute. This smell alone feels like an insult to everything they were taught. When Hada finally sits, her hands hover above the plate. She expects a blow for eating before men, but the guard nods politely and walks away. Around her, other women start to eat in silence. The taste, salt, fat, warmth makes their eyes sting. A Red Cross inspection from 1945 documented that U.S. policy provided every POW with about 2,300 calories per day, the same ration as American soldiers. Even hygiene kits and medical supplies were distributed equally. To the Japanese women raised on deprivation and rigid hierarchy, this wasn't kindness. It was dissonance. They fed us before themselves. One later wrote, "We didn't understand it." Private Lasker appears again, clipboard in hand, checking roll call. He moves methodically, no swagger, no malice. Hata studies him as he walks by. The previous night's words still ring in her head. "You're safe." She doesn't believe them, not yet. But every ordinary act, every cup refilled, every folded blanket chips away at the walls built by propaganda. The nurses whisper among themselves, "Is this a trick before interrogation? Is it American strategy to weaken them through comfort?" No one knows, but the longer they stay, the more contradictions pile up. When Lasker catches Hata watching him, he smiles. Brief, awkward, almost human. She looks away fast. He doesn't seem offended. That moment plants something dangerous, curiosity, because before long she'll overhear the guards laughing not cruelly, but like young men far from home. And what she hears next will shake the last certainty she still clings to. Night settles over the camp like a held breath quiet, stretched thin between rain showers and distant artillery. The women are inside their tents, whispering in fragments. Hata sits by the entrance, hands folded, staring at the outline of the guard tower. Her mind replays the same impossible question. Why mercy? She'd spent years being told the Americans were monsters, brutes, who killed prisoners for sport. Her officers drilled it into every nurse's head. Capture means dishonor, dishonor means death. Yet here she is, fed, sheltered, still alive. The contradiction gnaws at her like hunger. Outside, two guards walk past, laughing softly. She hears the word nurses and stiffens. They don't sound mocking, just human, tired, maybe even kind. One says, "They're medics, not killers." The other replies, "Yeah, let them rest. They've seen enough." Hata freezes. No one in her army ever used that tone with her, not her commanders, not the male soldiers she patched together on the battlefield. Later, reports from 1946 intelligence debriefings revealed a pattern. About 30% of Japanese POW suffered emotional shock at being treated humanely. It wasn't comfort, it was collapse. The ideology they'd fought for couldn't explain decency. Hata presses her fingers against the tent fabric, listening. The guards keep talking about home, about baseball, about coffee shortages back in the States. She catches fragments. Brooklyn, rain, Christmas. The words mean nothing, but the tone does. Warmth, ease, a world where laughter isn't rationed. For the first time, she feels an ache sharper than fear. Envy. She remembers her training camp propaganda films. Enemy soldiers portrayed as beasts, their women as corrupted. Every reel ended with the same slogan, purity or death. She'd believed it absolutely. Now, that belief trembles like a candle in wind. Her fellow nurses whisper that maybe this is all a trick, that humiliation will come later, but Hata isn't sure anymore. The Americans' routines, their jokes, their rules, even their respect, feel too consistent, too mundane to be deception. She lies down, eyes open, listening to the faint laughter fading outside the tent. It doesn't sound like the enemy. It sounds like a different version of peace, and with that thought, her mind drifts back to another island, another cliff, where mercy never came. The wind changes, and suddenly the camp's night sounds footsteps, canvas, murmurs blend into another world. Hata closes her eyes, and the rain becomes ocean spray. Saipan, 1944, the cliffs blaze with firelight and despair. She remembers, standing among other nurses, their white uniforms streaked with blood and soot. The American loudspeakers boomed through the smoke, "You will not be harmed." But their officers had already ordered otherwise: no surrender, no mercy, no life after capture. One nurse pulled the pin from a grenade hidden under her bandage. Another clutched a baby, whispering an apology before leaping from the edge. Hata still hears the echoes, the dull thuds below, the screams that stopped midair. Over 1,000 civilians died that week, many by their own hands. Imperial broadcasts later called them heroes. But standing here years later, in this muddy POW camp where the guards offer blankets instead of bullets, the word hero feels twisted. The propaganda had made it sound noble, the truth had felt like madness. Back then, the officers said, "Your bodies are the Emperor's property." They burned that idea into every recruit. Even as medics, the women's purpose was sacrifice, to die beautifully, not to survive honorably. Hata remembers holding the hand of her best friend Nurse Sakiko as they watched the cliffs burn. Sakiko had whispered, "If they catch me, I'll jump." Hata had nodded. She never saw Sakiko again. The memories slam against her ribs like waves. She grips the edge of her cot, knuckles white. Here in Okinawa, in this American camp, the guards move quietly, not cruelly. One of them, Private Lasker, passes by her tent holding a photograph, his wife in a summer dress, smiling against a white fence. He pauses, sees her watching, and hesitates. Then, without words, he holds out the photo. Hata doesn't understand why. She looks at the woman's face, soft eyes, same age, maybe same fears, and something inside her cracks. She reaches into her pocket and pulls out her own picture, edges burned, faces faded. Her mother and younger sister, lost in Tokyo's firebombing. 2 photographs, 2 worlds, 1 war, and in that shared silence something human, something forbidden, begins to form. The photo trembles slightly in Hata's hands. The image of Private Lasker's wife, sunlight, white fence, soft smile. Feels like it belongs to another universe. Her own photo, the one she's kept folded in her uniform pocket for months, is cracked and stained with smoke. Her sister's eyes stare back from 1945, Tokyo, wide, still, and gone. For a long moment, the 2 pictures hang between them in the morning light, proof that enemies bleed the same color. Lasker says something she doesn't fully understand, his accent thick, words slow. "Home," he says, pointing at his photo. Then, gently, "You." Hata hesitates. Then she points to her photo. "Gone." The word slices through the air like a blade. Lasker's smile falters. He nods, jaw tight, and for the first time she sees not a guard, not a victor, just another person carrying ghosts. Historical records show that more than 16 million American men served overseas, while nearly 2.7 million Japanese women worked in military or auxiliary roles. They fought parallel wars, one industrial, one sacrificial, each sustained by propaganda that made the other side less than human. But in this small, muddy camp, 2 photographs are doing what entire governments could not, reminding enemies that the war was built on mirrors. Lasker takes out a pencil stub and flips his photo. On the back, scrawled in faint letters, it reads, "Wait for me, Lily." He taps the words, looks at her, then mimics writing. Hata understands. She pulls a charcoal stub from her medical pouch and writes in kanji on the back of her photo, "I will remember you." No translators, no diplomacy, just 2 names scratched into paper. For the first time, she feels the crushing weight of what they've both lost, and maybe what they're beginning to find. The sound of boots in the distance breaks the spell. An officer shouts for rotation. Lasker folds his photo carefully, tucks it away, and steps back into formation. Hata does the same, slipping hers beneath her sleeve. As the morning wind picks up, she catches herself whispering the unfamiliar name Lily, like a prayer. And that single word becomes the bridge that will soon carry laughter across a language barrier. Neither side expected to cross. The camp feels different now, less like a cage, more like a strange experiment in coexistence. Days pass in rhythm, roll call, meals, maintenance, silence. But something begins to slip through those rigid hours' laughter. It starts small. A guard drops a tin plate, curses under his breath. One of the nurses, nervous and curious, mimics his tone perfectly. Damn it. The other women gasp, then burst into shy giggles. The guard laughs too, shaking his head. Private Lasker glances over from the supply tent, smiling for the first time in days. Language becomes their battlefield now, words exchanged like smuggled rations. Rice, Hata says, pointing at the pot. Good, Lasker grins. Too salty. The nurses repeat the phrase until it dissolves into laughter. Even the interpreter can't help but chuckle. It's a small rebellion against everything they've been taught. American policy after 1945 included something radical: education programs inside POW camps. Reports confirm that 43 Pacific camps offered English lessons, cultural training, even basic civics. The goal wasn't propaganda, it was rehumanization, to make soldiers understand their enemies weren't faceless. Hata doesn't know this. She just knows that each new word chips away at the walls built by fear. She practices secretly, tracing English letters in the dirt with her finger. Safe, coffee, thank you. Sometimes when the guards pass, she hides the words with her boot. But Lasker catches her once and laughs not mockingly, but softly. He squats beside her, draws a crude smiley face next to the word safe. She doesn't get the joke, but she laughs anyway. The camp begins to breathe differently. Guards talk less like jailers, prisoners less like ghosts. They trade tiny gifts: buttons, folded paper cranes, a tin of instant coffee. One evening, as the sun burns low, the nurses hum a lullaby from home. The melody drifts across the barbed wire, and the Americans listen without interrupting. Lasker mouths the tune silently, pretending he understands. Hata catches him. You sing, she says, grinning. He shrugs, maybe. The others laugh again, but this time it's not from tension. It's from recognition. And that laughter, fragile and forbidden, becomes the camp's first real act of peace. But tomorrow, that fragile calm will be tested because orders are coming. And one of them will change everything. Morning fog rolls in like breath from the sea. The camp is quieter than usual, too quiet. Corporal Hata senses it before anyone says a word. Private Lasker isn't at roll call. His post near the gate stands empty, helmet missing, boots gone. She scans the yard, heart unexpectedly pounding. Minutes later, a new guard steps in, clipboard in hand. Private Lasker trants for orders. He announces flatly. The words echo inside her chest like a shell burst. Transfer. That means gone another camp, another front, maybe even home. The women murmur, confused. To them, he was just another guard. But for Hata, he was something else, a breach in the wall, a living contradiction. By midday, she spots him near the truck convoy, duffel slung over his shoulder. He's scribbling on a ration tin with a dull pencil, pressing hard enough to dent the metal. When he sees her watching, he walks over, boots crunching on gravel. No translator this time. He holds out the tin. The letters scratched faintly across it read, "Sit on my lap." For a second, she freezes, then realizes it's not an order. It's a memory, a private joke carved into steel, turning the most humiliating moment of her capture into something else, a strange symbol of survival. Reports from declassified Pacific archives show that nearly 60% of U.S. POW guards in Okinawa were under the age of 22. Many were farm boys, clerks, or mechanics drafted straight from small towns. They weren't hardened men of war. They were kids improvising decency amid chaos. Lasker points at the tin, then at her, miming laughter. "Remember?" he says softly. She nods, throat tightening. There's so much she wants to say thank you, good, bye, don't go. But none of the words exist in her limited English. So instead, she salutes, not militarily, but gently, 2 fingers to her brow, the gesture of a nurse saying farewell to a patient. He grins, half embarrassed, then taps his chest and whispers, "Safe." She watches him climb into the truck. The engine roars, gravel kicks up, and within seconds he's gone, swallowed by the mist. That night, she hides the ration tin beneath her cot, wrapping it in cloth like a relic. She doesn't yet know that the Americans will soon transport her to north, toward interrogation, where that tin will become her only proof that mercy ever existed. The air inside the rail car tastes like rust and diesel. Chains rattle softly beneath the floorboards as the train jerks forward, heading north through bomb-scorched countryside. Corporal Hata sits among 24 other prisoners, nurses, clerks, orderlies' faces pale under flickering light. Each carries the same blank stare, the look of people who have run out of expectations. Outside, the world slides by in shades of ash and smoke. Fields once green are nothing but craters now. Every station they pass is a skeleton, signboards shot through, roofs caved in. Somewhere far away, a rooster crows, absurdly alive. U.S. intelligence reports from 1940, 5 to 46, record nearly 1,200 interrogations in the Pacific Theater. Most were done quietly, methodically, no torture, no shouting. Cigarettes, soft questions, calm rooms. The goal wasn't fear, it was information through trust. Hata doesn't understand that yet. A translator sits across from her, clean uniform, careful tone. He opens a notebook. "Your name, please." She answers mechanically. He nods, writes, then another question. "What unit? What duties?" She hesitates, glances at the 2 soldiers standing by the door. They're younger than she expected, boots still caked with mud from the front. One offers her a cigarette. When she shakes her head, he just shrugs, lights it for himself, and leans back against the wall. The rhythm of the train hums like a lullaby for the broken. The translator continues, "Did you witness any orders regarding civilians?" His voice is polite, almost too gentle. Hata answers truthfully, what she knows, what she saw, what she refuses to remember. He doesn't press, just listens. It confuses her more than hostility ever could. At 1 you poise, a you can H Japanese, a NDLE, it nase, to sit on his lap. The question slices through her like cold air. Her hands instinctively touch the cloth bundle hidden in her bag, the ration tin. She whispers, "I was there." The translator's pen pauses midair. "You?" She nods slowly. He doesn't smile, doesn't judge. Just writes a single note on the page. Lap story Okinawa, verified. Outside, the train wheels scream against the tracks as if the metal itself resists moving forward. Because what began as one soldier's absurd act will soon echo beyond this carriage, into newspapers, rumors, and politics. By the time the train reaches the next camp, the story has already escaped. Nobody knows who told it first. A translator, a clerk, or maybe one of the guards who thought it was harmless. But by the week's end, whispers travel faster than orders. An American soldier made a Japanese nurse sit on his lap. The rumor mutates with every retelling. Some say it was an act of mercy, others call it humiliation. The truth, quiet, human, unremarkable, has no place in war stories. Inside the camp, Hata senses the shift. Interrogators look longer when they read her file. Guards nudge each other as she walks past. It's not mockery, it's curiosity. The myth has begun. One American corporal jokes, "Guess chivalry's a war crime now." Another answers, "Depends who's telling it." Laughter follows, uneasy and thin. Archival documents from 1945, censorship records reveal at least 38 reports from POW camps flagged for sentimental fraternization. That meant any behavior showing compassion between captor and captive, gifts, gestures, even jokes, was scrubbed before reaching the press. But some stories leaked anyway, bending truth into spectacle. The so-called lap story became one of them. Hata hears pieces of it through the walls, guards talking, translators whispering, a nurse from another unit asking if she's the one. Each time, her stomach twists tighter. What began as confusion and humanity is now being recast as scandal. She tries to sleep, but the voices won't fade. She sees Lasker's face every time she closes her eyes, his grin, the word safe, the metal tin now wrapped beneath her blanket. None of the rumors mention his kindness, only the lap. The next morning, the camp's commanding officer summons her for another interview. His tone is professional, but his eyes betray curiosity. "Tell me about the incident," he says. She chooses her words carefully. "He wanted me safe," she whispers, not. She pauses, searching for English, not shame. The officer doesn't respond. He just nods, writes something, and dismisses her. But she knows what's happening. The story isn't hers anymore. It belongs to headlines, to gossip, to propaganda. And as the news spreads beyond the barbed wire, both nations will twist it into whatever suits their memory of the war. The story crosses the ocean before Hata ever leaves the camp. In Tokyo, post-war newspapers, newly uncensored but still bleeding from defeat, twist the rumor into outrage. Japanese women forced to kneel by U.S. soldiers. No mention of mercy, no hint of restraint, just humiliation printed in bold ink. The American version, printed weeks later, says the opposite. Yank shows kindness to female POW. Truth has no flag, it's just collateral. The irony is almost cinematic. Two nations, one rebuilding pride, the other polishing victory, rewrite the same moment into mirror images. Hata's silence becomes everyone's narrative. By 1947, Japan's censors had already flagged 62% of all POW accounts as morale sensitive. Anything implying weakness, compassion, or moral confusion was buried. For America, the opposite stories of decency, benevolence became moral currency in the new Cold War climate. So the myth grew. In one pamphlet, an American journalist described a gallant soldier protecting helpless women. In another, a Japanese columnist raged about the mockery of surrender and the death of virtue. Both writers were wrong, but both were rewarded. Meanwhile, the real woman behind the story sat in silence, sewing medical bandages in a Tokyo hospital basement. Hata heard the rumors whenever new patients arrived, some sneering, others whispering in awe. She never corrected them. How could she explain that the act wasn't cruel or noble, but something far more fragile, ordinary decency mistaken for scandal? In one rare interview archived decades later, a U.S. censor described the problem. "We didn't know what to do with mercy. It didn't fit the propaganda. Neither side did." Hata's name was quietly removed from military records. Lasker's file was sealed and classified non-disciplinary. Both vanished into paperwork, buried under victory reports and reconstruction budgets, but the phrase, "sit on my lap," lingered like an echo, its meaning changed, twisted, weaponized by those who never saw that rain-soaked night in Okinawa. When Hata finally looks at the ration tin again years later, the letters are rusted, nearly unreadable. Yet she runs her fingers over them, remembering not the words but the tone, the soft voice that said, "You're safe." And now, after decades of distortion, she decides to speak, because myths fade, but testimony endures. Tokyo, 1971, a gray afternoon. The war feels like another lifetime, yet its ghosts still walk the corridors of memory. Corporal Hata, now in her late 50s, sits beneath a buzzing light inside a university recording room. A reel-to-reel tape spins beside her, the slow whir filling the silence between breaths. Across the table, two interviewers from the Japanese Oral History Project adjust their microphones. They've been collecting testimonies from former nurses, soldiers, and civilians, 17 women in total. Only 3, including Hata, agreed to speak on record. When the first question comes, her hands tighten in her lap. "Can you tell us," one interviewer begins carefully, "about the American soldier?" Hata exhales slowly. Her voice carries the weight of every rumor, every lie that's followed her for 26 years. "He said, 'Sit on my lap,'" she begins. "Everyone thought it was to shame us, but no." She shakes her head gently. "He said it because I was shaking, because the ground was cold, because he wanted me safe." The room goes still. Even the tape seems to quiet. For the first time, the truth emerges, not polished, not dramatic, just painfully human. A small act of decency misunderstood by an entire world. She continues, explaining how that night shattered her beliefs about enemies, honor, and survival. How the enemy fed her before himself. How kindness frightened her more than cruelty ever could. The interviewers glance at each other, unsure how to respond. One finally says, "Do you remember his name?" Hata smiles faintly. "Lasker, Private Lasker." She pauses, touching the rusted ration tin beside her. "The letters sit on my lap, barely visible now, carved by a boy who probably never knew what his gesture meant to the person it saved." When asked what she once remembered, she looks directly into the camera, that mercy exists even in war, but only if someone chooses it. The tape clicks off. Silence. Outside, the sounds of modern Tokyo, traffic, chatter, life flow past, indifferent to her words. As she leaves, she places the tin on the table for the archivists. "Keep it," she says softly. "It's his story too." That night, under a quiet Tokyo rain, a single truth survives the noise. Sometimes, one human gesture can outlive a war.